podcast. We're gonna ramble on about movies and books and television and film festivals and directors and all this other stuff that I really know nothing about because they made this really long list of things that they want to talk about and I can't even read through all of them, but it's gonna be great. Okay, start the show.
1. Hello and welcome to the Daily Planet podcast, your daily dose of all things movies, TV, books, and anything else we feel like talking about. My name is Scott Daly, editor-in-chief of dailyplanetfilms.com, and I'm joined as always by my co-host and co-editor, Matt Freeman. Matt, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty good, Scott. How are you?
Doing well.
All right.
Ready for our Halloween movie Spooktacular?
Yeah, I am. We all have our favorite movies lined up, our favorite scary movies to tell you about.
Yep, and in thinking of who could join us as our special guest, the person immediately came to mind. Friend of the podcast and previous guest, James Gentry, is here to talk about his scary movies.
Hello, guys. Hello, everyone.
Hey, James, you love horror movies, right?
Yeah, I do. Big fan, or I guess I've always liked them. Been watching them for a very long time. Just one of those things that you kind of just flipping the channels and can't help but stop type of thing. It's that genre, and then from there, I actually gained like a pretty legitimate, I guess, interest in some of the older ones, mostly. A lot of the newer ones, I'm just not a huge fan of. But yeah, overall, a pretty big fan.
Cool. And Matt, you don't really like scary movies.
Yeah, I mean, I avoid them, I guess, because I'm very susceptible to scary movies. I remember, distinctly remember in high school, I went to see Signs with a good friend of mine, David, and we were like both terrified, and it was overall pretty hilarious how much we reacted to it, and then we sort of told other people about this, and they thought we were ridiculous because they're like, Signs, it's so corny. So this is generally how I react to scary movies.
Science has its moments.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, there's.
And then I see aliens in my house for the next week.
Yeah. See, I'm kind of like they impact me a lot too. Like I get very scared watching even bad scary movies. I'll still get scared watching them, but I like it. Like I enjoy it. Like I do the thing if I'm watching a scary movie, like I did with one of the ones we're talking about today. If I'm watching it sitting alone in my bed, like. If I get scared, I'll like pretend like I have to check something really important on my cell phone just so I have an excuse. And there's no one else there with me, so I'm just lying to myself. It doesn't make any sense. But I'll do that.
No, I think every person has that like little moment where you're like, okay, I know that if I look away for about 3 seconds, the scary part's gonna happen. And then you're gonna be like, "Oh, I missed it," and like, "Oh, geez," but and then you like look back and it still hasn't happened yet, and you're like, "Just happen already," like while I'm looking at my phone, and then boom, out of nowhere.
And I think that's actually a good point because I think that the movies that we've selected show a kind of different range of the types of different horror films there are. There's a bunch of different ways to be scary. There's atmosphere, there's jump scares, and there's just a scenario that in itself is terrifying if it were a reality. And I think these three movies run the gambit of that. So we're going to get to those here in a sec, and we'll have each of us introduce our movie. But before we did that, I wanted to cover news real quick because there's some interesting stuff happening in the world of film that we've been a part of. The first thing I wanted to talk about was this past week in the box office. I follow box office news because I'm a ridiculous nerd like that, and this week was awful. There were 4 movies that opened up, and they all performed terribly. 2 of them became the 2 worst performing weekends in the history of cinema. At over 2,000 theaters. So, Rock the Casbah, which is a Bill Murray movie, opened at 1.5 million at over 2,000 theaters, which is dreadful for that many theaters. Gem and the Holograms, another one, which is a weird movie based on like a 80s cartoon or something. I'm really not surprised that didn't do well, but 1.3 million was how bad that opened.
Yeah.
The other ones were Paranormal Activity, The Ghost Dimension, opened terribly, 8 million. Last Witch Hunter, the new Vin Diesel movie, opened awful at 10 million. So yeah, the number one movie of the week was The Martian in its fourth week, and it's not because it has nothing to do with the fact that The Martian is a great movie, which it is. It just has to do with the fact that every other movie that was released this week was awful.
Jeez. I just can't fathom the Bill Murray movie doing so poorly when everyone loves Bill Murray. It seems like they could sell tickets just based on his name, even if it's a terrible movie.
Right, yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, how marketed was this movie? I mean, I've seen the trailer once. I'd heard of the name and everything. Yeah. But, I don't have cable or anything, so I'm wondering, like, was this even like a trailer? I mean, there was no spots, I'd imagine.
There were some. I saw some spots on TV.
Did you?
But yeah, I mean, it was very poorly marketed. It's not a huge budget film. I don't see the budget here on my list, but it's definitely not going to make money even at its small budget. I think it was a combination of poor marketing, or poorly targeted marketing at least, combined with really awful critic reviews.
Really?
Yeah, people listened to Rotten Tomatoes, and it was sitting at, I think, 8% at one point. So no one's going to go see that movie.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, that'll do it. Yeah, I forgot about Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, it's still at 8%.
Yeah.
I just looked at it.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's interesting, but it also leads me into another thing that I happen to look at while looking at this list. Bridge of Spies is a Steven Spielberg movie with Tom Hanks in it that is going to limp across its budget mark. It's right now at $32.5 million at a budget of 40, plus marketing. So it'll probably end up making money because I'm not sure. I'm sure it's doing okay internationally too. These are just domestic grosses. But I mean, we're living in a world now where a Steven Spielberg, Tom Hanks collaboration movie is struggling to pass its budget. Steve Jobs is another movie that's getting amazing reviews. It's written by Aaron Sorkin, directed by Danny Boyle, has Fassbender in it, and is a popular subject. And it's 9 million, almost 10 million after 3 weeks. It's got a $30 million budget. Again, internationally, it'll probably make its money back, but
wow,
I mean, it's kind of crazy, right? I mean,
yeah. I don't, I guess it does. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't surprise me a whole lot. I feel like, I mean, it's kind of, it's October, it's towards the end of the year. I feel like a lot of people, I don't know if it's a time thing. Do you have time to see all the, I mean, these are, like, some of these movies I really want to see. I will see. Like, I haven't even seen The Martian yet, and I want to see that still. And I'm definitely seeing Bridge of Spies because, I'm a huge fan of Tom Hanks, and Steve Jobs looked fantastic, But at the same time, it's like you have all these options, at your own home now. Everything can be streamed, and you have, just options on options, whether it's a show or a movie or I don't know. I guess I'm shocked, but not that as shocked as I would have been a couple years ago.
Yeah, and that's something Matt and I were talking about a little bit earlier, was movies are kind of, at least going to the theater is kind of an event thing now.
It is.
You're going to go for the big budget spectacle films. These smaller films that, even though they're good and smart and well done, those aren't movies that you're going to really get out of the house and go to the theater for anymore. At least unless you're me and you're crazy. But
no, it's true. Yeah. A lot of time it's like a big event thing,
Yeah, especially now that I have kids, I have to really sort of plan, the small handful of movies that I'm going to see in a given year.
Yeah.
Whereas before I would just go see everything. So that makes me aware of the fact that, there's a huge segments of the population that are thinking similarly. They're picking out exactly the movies they want to see. And what's funny to me is the Steve Jobs movie is one that I would have wanted to see, opening weekend. It's one that I still really want to see. So it does surprise me that one in particular is doing so badly. The other ones I'm not surprised because I never would have, gone out of my way to see those movies.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're both right. I think, people like you, Matt, there are a lot of people like you that don't have a lot of time to get to the theater. And then you've got there's so much television now. You have so many options at home that you can get your entertainment from there without ever having to leave the house.
It's almost like, you feel like you're not going to miss a whole ton if you don't see it in theaters. Whereas to me, like not even like back in like high school, but even like in college or a couple 10 years ago, I was going crazy if I feel like I was gonna miss a movie going through the theaters, and it doesn't even have to be like a big budget blockbuster or anything, just one of those movies like The Martian. I mean, if The Martian had come out like say like 2008, I would have been probably one of the first ones. I mean, like seriously, opening night, type of thing with a group of friends. But I guess that maybe it's just, maybe I'm just getting older. Like, there's a lot of people that don't, aren't really around anymore. A lot of people live in different places. The people that I do go see movies with now, they're mostly fans of kind of the horror genre, so we really kind of stick to that. Like I can't really convince any of my work friends to go see like Bridge of Spies, right? So that's something that I'll probably see with my dad. I don't know if they're even interested in The Martian. Like that's something I'd have to like ask a couple of buddies and be like, "Hey guys, let's go see this. I want to see this. I've read the book." And Steve Jobs. I mean, as much as people talk, about the subject or as much, that trailer just kind of like pulls me in every time. I don't know if it's the music or what, and I just haven't really heard anybody like suggest it or talk about it. But
Yeah.
I have no doubt I'll like all of them once I.
Gentry, you need to get over your fear of seeing a movie by yourself, because that I used to hate that too, and then I did it, and it's fine. It feels weird like the first time you do it, and then after that it's just whatever.
Yeah, I mean it's not even that, honestly. It's just I just feel like I don't have time for. Yeah. I mean I need to make time. Go by myself.
So basically what I will say for the people listening out there, if you haven't seen Bridge of Spies, if you haven't seen Steve Jobs, if you haven't seen The Martian, well, that's doing fine. If you haven't seen Crimson Peak, though, if you like movies, those are good movies. You will like movies. You should go see them. Don't see Goosebumps. Apparently that is kind of good. That confuses me. But anyway,
73%.
I mean, you can take any concept and make it kind of goofy and fun, I guess.
Yeah.
More like don't go see The Last Witch Hunter, which just seems like
Although I'll probably end up saying that.
I'll probably. I actually like Vin Diesel enough. I like the terrible Chronicles of Riddick movies. Quite a lot, actually. I'm just going to say that out loud. So
I liked them too. Yeah. Anyway, the other thing I wanted to really quickly talk about is something Matt did to me on Friday morning and completely ruined my life for 3 days. Matt sent me a link to a 500-ish page post on. It was a post on a message board, I think, originally.
It was from something awful.
Oh, okay.
It was posted in installments over a period of literally months, I think.
Yeah. So this is a woman that has over 500 and something pages. Discussed the Transformers trilogy, the first three Michael Bay movies, in excruciating detail, and I started reading it and I couldn't stop. It's fascinating. Like, these are movies that I don't like on any level, but this thing kind of made me appreciate them to a different level.
Yeah.
It made me really think that as much as I dislike a lot of the work Michael Bay does, I think he's a director that kind of knows exactly what he's doing, and he's way smarter than we give him credit for. Yeah,
it definitely. It's funny because pretty much everyone I've pointed this thing to, it sounds ridiculous on face. It's a 500-page essay on dumb movies that no one likes, but once you hear that this exists, you will not be able to help checking it out just out of morbid curiosity.
Yep.
And then once you check it out, you probably won't be able to help reading it out of fascination as to just like, well, that kind of makes sense. Well, that also kind of makes sense. And before you know it, you're rewatching the Transformers movies to try to find all their hidden meaning.
Which is exactly what happened to me. So thank you, Matt. That was my weekend. On top of watching all these scary movies, I watched Transformers and read a 300-page book about it.
Scott, never in a million years do I think would have ever heard you say that you felt an appreciation for Michael Bay films, let alone the Transformers series.
So here's the thing,
ladies and gentlemen, this is a new thing.
Here's the thing.
Give me like three. I want to hear just like 3 points, like 3 actual things that, like, something where you're like, I felt enlightened by this lady that kind of wrote this thing.
The Autobots, the good guys, are insane.
Yeah, they're evil, genocidal psychopaths,
Yeah.
all of them.
So the Decepticons are definitely bad guys. The movie's clear in that, but the good guys are just as insane, and even to a more dishonest extent. I think it talked in detail about. It's funny that the Decepticons have that name, considering they're being the most honest of their intentions, whereas the Autobots constantly lie.
It's
Like
pretty ironic, yeah.
even in the narration, Optimus Prime is lying to the viewer about what happened on his planet in the first one, which is revealed by the third one that everything he basically said was a complete lie.
Yeah.
What?
There's also so just to kind of move. There's this thing about like violence to the face, and how like the Autobots are always attacking the faces of their enemies and like ripping their faces apart, and like the way the animation in the movies is like when they rip someone's face off, it is sort of more like they ripped off like a person's face than like a robot because of the amount of like liquid that sprays out. And Optimus Prime will like rip someone's face.
I was gonna say, I do recall
"Give me
Optimus.
your face.
Yeah, doing that in the second one when he rips the helicopter. I think in that epic fight, like pretty much the coolest action scene, or one of the only action scenes I like of the whole series.
Yeah, that was
smack right in the middle of the second one.
I'd completely forgotten that our hero character at the end of the second movie screams, "Give me your face."
He does,
and rips a living being. It's a machine, but it's a living being. He rips his face off.
Yeah.
And
then at the end of the last movie, he executes one of the bad guys in cold blood, and then the other one begs for mercy, and then he executes him in cold blood.
Oh my God.
These are our good guys.
The Autobots are crazy.
and I'm actually. I hope she does I don't know if she will. I don't know how old this thing is.
This was years ago.
Yeah, I very much would enjoy seeing a follow-up to the latest Transformers movie, because literally in that movie, Optimus Prime frees the dinosaur robots, tells them they're free, and then 5 seconds later tells them, "You have to fight with us or we will kill you."
Yeah, I do recall that. Actually, I saw that a couple months ago.
That's not freedom. He's insane. The story of Transformers is the story of the leader of this group of robots that's basically a resistance because they've lost the war. Yeah. It's revealed. Just getting more and more insane as the story goes on.
Yeah.
It's hilarious.
Guys, do y'all think that this is actually Michael Bay's intention? I mean, do you think that he has some
I do,
behind
actually.
this?
Absolutely.
I didn't at first because it was so absurd, but after watching the movies again and then just sort of thinking about it, there's too much. It's 500 pages worth of crap, and there's too much of it makes sense, and too much of it is actually in the movies for it to just all be made up.
Well, and this is something that I tell people, about movies constantly. One of the reasons I love film so much is it's because it's a world in which the creators can control everything. So they can control how light falls on someone's face. They can control exactly where the camera is and where a person is staged in a room. I mean, every one of these decisions is intentional and a lot of the time has purpose behind it. Right. So, I mean, when people look at this stuff and there's this whole part in the third movie where they dissect a scene where the female character Carly is like in the middle of it, and like the background shape to like point towards her, like make it, like the curves of the room make you point towards her, but Shia LaBeouf's character is too busy looking at the fancy cars and all the fancy toys to ever see her. I mean, that's like, that stuff is absolutely intentional. I mean, there's no way it's not. Yeah. So that's what I find fascinating about film, is that all this stuff is on purpose. And when you get to read it in an article like this, where someone has taken the time to point out the details of every single thing, I can't help myself. Yeah. So we're going to put that in the show notes, and those of you that are crazy like us will ruin their lives for at least a couple days reading this thing in great detail.
Happy to have played a role in spreading this information hazard.
Possible future episode discussing Michael Bay's film?
Maybe. he still makes a lot of bad movies. Let's not. He's a good. I
don't know, that Pearl Harbor.
I think like the fact is he's not a great filmmaker, but he's trying to say things. So
yeah, absolutely.
No, yeah, definitely piqued my interest.
Absolutely.
So.
So, so that's enough of that. Enjoy reading about Transformers. Those of you that will click the link, which I think is going to be a lot of you. Sorry about that. So let's move on to Halloween and scary movies and the movies that we picked. So, Gentry, I'll let you go first since you're our special guest.
Yeah. Okay.
You picked it. I was kind of surprised by your pick. So, if you could explain. If you could explain,
sure.
both what you picked, the plot of it, and then why you picked it.
For sure. First off, I hope I may have jumped the gun on the homework assignment, and although this is probably one of my more liked, or I'll put it in my favorite of the last 15 years.
Well, no, we don't have to say. I mean, we don't have to say your favorite scary movie because my pick wasn't my favorite either. It's just a movie that I think is worth talking about. So
for sure, okay, and that's fair enough. I mean, I definitely
people are waiting with bated breath. So tell them the title of the film before.
Okay, yeah. So the film I picked is Sinister. I think it came out a couple years back, maybe like 2012 or something. So I actually hadn't seen it until this year. My colleagues at work, friends, were talking about seeing the second, and so I was like, well, I have to see the first. And I'd always thought that that it was always one of those where I don't even know if it was much of the trailer or just more of the images within the trailer. I mean, Ethan Hawke, is obviously the star of the film, and something about supernatural / legend, or these myth-like figures, characters that come out of literature, history, or whatever it is. They always pique my interest. That's kind of grabs me. But so a quick, I guess, summation of the movie is this family moves to a town, and it's you have this guy who basically is writing about these crimes, these murders that occur in this particular house. But of course he lies to his wife and family. What they do is he moves to the actual house where the crime was committed to research it and to write about it. And he's basically he's like famous for writing one book, but he's wanting to write another. And it turns out that there's this interconnected web of murders that occur kind of across the country and potentially around the world that are all related to all these similar clues that, or should I say, these similar occurrences that happen, and the way everything goes down. And then, is this a spoiler alert type zone? But
yeah, I
think we're gonna.
Okay. Well, so I guess he ends up finding out that it turns out that this the plot isn't actually this figure who's called Bagul, or this kind of background like figure. It's actually about it's kind of about the family. It's really kind of like a metaphor for the way he is, the way he treats his family, not off the surface or anything, but kind of like how the neglect, almost like he's not the greatest dad. Like he's kind of obsessed with his work. He's obsessed with these crimes, and he has a little bit of a drinking problem. So it kind of combines into him neglecting his children. And it turns out that this myth-like figure kind of pops in and causes these causes almost like maybe the most vulnerable child in the family to do some pretty crazy things, like kill their own family. And he ends up finding all these reels of all these different instances that occur around the country, and starts to kind of put the puzzle pieces together. And at the same time that he's trying to stay sane and gather all this information for his book, it's actually occurring to it's actually happening to his family in real time. He has a son who has like these night terrors that cause him to go crazy, and so automatically everyone thinks it's kind of like, oh, what's going on with this kid, but then it's kind of a it takes a real turn, and it turns out to be something completely different. But overall, I mean, I thought it was kind of a fresh idea. The house obviously isn't anything new. A lot of times these haunts and everything occur in some kind of house where there's a previous murder or some kind of abandonment. But I thought the structure was really neat. I liked. Anyway,
Well, the central, I guess, conceit of the film is these Super 8 reels, right? That he finds in the attic the first day he moved in. That basically it's kind of like a voyeur view into a family playing, and then cuts to a videotaping of their terrible murder. I think one of them is they're tied to like pool chairs weighted with concrete, and they get pulled one by one into the pool. One of them is they're like tied to a tree branch, which is tied to another. They're hung to a tree branch, which is tied to another one that is set up to break, and then that automatically hangs them. I think one like they get run over by a lawnmower or something.
Yeah, and that's kind of where that's where it's at its peak. The real jump scare kind of comes in.
Right.
And they use noise. They're real good with the sound effects and I guess I thought the score was, or I thought the music that they played was the same in the first as the second, but I think it actually wasn't. I think the second one had that oldie song, and the first one didn't. Anywho, it was just something that I noticed today when I was kind of going back and looking at it. But
I actually watched this for the first time. I think I thought I had seen it before, but then I watched it last night, and I didn't really remember what was happening. So I think it was actually the first time last night. So I liked the conceit. I liked the idea of it. Kind of, I was talking to Matt a little bit. It kind of relates to The Ring, and that like the power of film,
right?
Like because the way the monster like gets in is through these movies. Like I think the legend is like if you see him, like his power can be transferred via seeing him. So like he's in each one of these Super 8 home videos that are cut. And so the more he watches them, the more powerful the thing gets, or whatever.
I'll play the role of the audience member who hasn't seen the movie because I haven't seen it. So what about this movie is sort of the most striking thing? Like, what is it that makes it, one of your favorite movies that makes you want to recommend it to people?
Yeah, I mean, to me, so I always like an image that resonates, something that sticks. And I like when it's a little bit grittier, so they use a Super 8 film. That's kind of the look, right? I thought they did something about the the other things that I really like kind of enjoyed about this particular house and kind of the way it was filmed. And I don't really know this director very well, so Scott Derrickson, but like he used a lot of like blue, like kind of like a blue tone, like the atmosphere of the house is, so obviously it's pretty dark, right? So it's your basic horror movie. The lighting is a little dim. He's watching it, everything's always in the dark. When he's working, it's like, just the one light is on and stuff. But when you actually kind of look at some of the other parts of the houses and kind of like in the background where you have the outside, it's not, normally I guess you're waiting to see some bright, but you actually see kind of these bluish tones. And so the one thing that I kind of started thinking about after the first time I saw it was who is Bagul, right? Who is this myth creature, right? And apparently it stems back from like ancient Babylonia, and like all like the I just thought of like kind of like the Hanging Gardens and the kind of the beautiful colors kind of went along with that with that whole city and everything. And it's real bluish, it's kind of that same exact tint. And I don't know if the director was kind of like trying to do something with that or any of that, but like it's something that kind of caught my eye. And like I said, it's just, to me, it's kind of like the history, but ultimately that has, really not, doesn't have a lot to do with the story. The story is what drew me in. It's this guy who's kind of like going crazy, and you really think that it's him. You think that it's kind of him like going nuts and starting to affect his family and stuff. And it's really, he's just kind of a pawn in the whole thing. And it ends up being, his behavior kind of lets it in at, a level that's, where they can't really turn back from. And, I don't know. I would say kind of a mix between, I guess it depends on if you kind of what me and Scott briefly mentioned today. It's like if you're either a fan of the jump scares or, I'm not a fan of them like in the sense of the definition. Like I'm not waiting for the next great jump scare. But, I think that some of them play an important role at kind of making you, really kind of get your heart racing and kind of the whole point of a scary movie, is kind of get you on the edge. And I thought it did a good job of that, but really, I thought the kind of a mix between the the way the cinematography was with the Super 8 reels. I just thought they were done pretty well.
Yeah, so that's a good point. Sorry to interrupt.
No, especially. I mean, go ahead. Yeah.
One of the cool things is, I think they're talking about the monster sucking people into film, basically, and so as the film goes on, it starts to more and more resemble these weird Super 8s. The lighting gets worse. The quality of the film looks worse. The cuts are rougher to more resemble these, like, and it was a creative.
It's like the present situation of the whole like ordeal is starting to affect the way the films are actually looking, and he gets like deeper and deeper into them. But I think it's that one moment. You have like the moment where they hang on the tree. Like that one is kind of creepy on its own. That's the house that they're at.
That's super powerful, and they started the movie with just
The
movie opens on a Super 8 cut of 4 kids standing under a tree. The limb breaks, and they all hung, and you see them literally.
Right. Which I thought was a great intro.
Yeah,
it really.
It sets the tone kind of right away.
It does. It sets the tone. But it's that pool scene that really gets me, and it's that subtle. It's I don't know if it's just like a thing in horror movies. Maybe I don't know. Halloween's my favorite scary movie of all time at the moment, and I've always appreciated the way, the Michael Myers type character, or the what do they call it, the shadow, the thing. How it slowly turns its head one way. Whether it's looking at the camera, or looking past the camera, but it's like that little slow turn. And I thought the Bagul in the pool really does it perfectly to where it just sent chills down my spine. On top of and then it goes back to Ethan Hawke like sitting there like sweating and drinking and realizing like I'm not seeing anything normal in these reels, like what is happening. And that's kind of when he starts to go a little bit nuts. But anyways, that's kind of what really got me. And I think it was kind of the twist. Really just kind of. Normally you'd be pushed on like it's almost like bad parenting. They weren't the greatest, most attentive parents, and he kind of put his job before his family, and because of that, Bagul was able to kind of take over, this girl's soul and use her to do his handiwork.
Yeah,
that's these films and keep the cycle going.
That's actually the thing that I found the most interesting. I was thinking about this movie today. And I was thinking about the fact that the movie kind of sets the whole thing up as that he's kind of the main character and these things are happening to him. But unbeknownst to him, like the whole time, his daughter is basically slowly being possessed by this thing. Because, Matt, since you haven't seen the movie, basically what the thing does is it possesses the youngest kid, and the youngest kid ends up killing his whole family and then like gets sucked into the film. And the process repeats over and over again. So, like, we only really get one scene when we see her even interacting with the thing or the ghosts of the kids. And I was thinking about that, and when I first thought about it, I was like, well, that's bad. That's bad filmmaking, because that's the most important part. We should see her slow possession more. But then the more I thought about it, I was like, no, that goes into his whole thing, because he's missing it because he's a bad parent. He's more focused on his stuff, that he's completely missing what's happening in his family. So not showing it actually was the right decision. And
he becomes like the detective, and it's almost like he's the one that's blind. He's the one missing it. Like you have the deputy, the kind of quirky deputy guy who's actually the star of the second one. But he kind of comes in. Yeah, he comes in and is basically trying to like help him, kind of realize that there's a little bit more going on. But at the, Ethan Hawke kind of shrugs him off as just kind of this, he calls him Deputy So-and-so, he's just like, oh.
Ethan Hawke's in the second one?
No, the deputy is.
Okay. I was like, he gets chopped into pieces at the end of this movie, so that would be impressive.
Exactly. But yeah, so like the deputy, the mom, even the son, like there's all these kind of, misfires where you're kind of like waiting for them to be like, you're crazy, but it's actually, it turns everything around, and, he continues to play the detective, putting the book aside and just giving it up almost and moving his whole family, but he's still not realizing that, you know, it's actually happening to his children, to his youngest, to his little girl, the girl that you thought was pretty much the most normal until, you know, she starts talking to these, you know, other kids that committed these crazy crimes. So, I mean, I guess maybe the only part that's a little fluffy is the creativity of these different reels, of the way these, but I think they were subtle enough to where they still scared the shit out of me, and they were still pretty creepy on their own. Unfortunately, not to really give any like spoilers for the second one or anything, but like unfortunately, I thought they took it to just a little bit, I don't know, a little too much on the second movie. Like they're trying to keep it, you know, original, like all these different ideas. But to me, that's not what it's about. You know, it's elements within these reels that make it, but you know, really, it's not just like, oh, what are they going to do next? Ooh, what idea did this person have to like murder their family? Like that's not really what it's about. But maybe some people, that's what kind of draws them in, or at least maybe the younger demographic.
And I think that's one thing with horror movies in general. I think they take a concept that's pretty good and interesting and then beat it to death with sequels. More than any other genre of film, I feel like that happens.
Yeah, I think that's what they did with Sinister. Yeah. Although it had some interesting elements, you know, I think to me it's like I'll probably just keep the first one on its own.
Just like based on your description, it sounds like they're going for some kind of metaphor where, you know, maybe it's alcoholism or something, where the dad brings something into the family basically, and then is totally oblivious to the effect that it's having on his family.
Yep.
And that's, you know, there's obvious things that could be a metaphor for, but then it's like, okay, you make a sequel and you leave behind that metaphor. You've now left behind everything. The soul of the movie.
Yeah. So I mean, overall, I see why you picked this movie. I mean, there's a lot of really bad horror out there, and this film isn't one of them.
Right.
I think it did rely on jump scares a little too much. There's a couple in particular that, like, they're just, you know, they're coming, and it's just like
probably the one thing I don't like, because I love the way they make Bagul look. Like, it to me, it's like it's they don't show in like a lot. You know, you almost get him as like this shadowy figure that almost like turns his face every now and again, but he like looks at you, but then all of a sudden it's like, just kidding, here's the surprise, like Bagul in your face, and I'm like, what? Like, no, don't do that.
Yeah, well,
like,
that one at the very end of the movie, there's the slow cut to the box of Movie sitting in the attic waiting for the next person, and you fucking know it's gonna happen.
Of course. Well, you're like, I picture like the producer sitting on his back, you know, leaning back on his chair and being like, you know what? Let's get one more Bagul face at the end there. I think that'll kind of wrap it up nicely. Just it's one little extra jump.
It's like a YouTube video level of bad. Like it's like you're just
like that.
It's But
I mean, take those out, and to me, it stays even creepier.
Well, it's a very. I like the creepiness. I like the slow turn to the camera that you talked about. There's a scene when he's like on the phone and he's paused one of the videos on the phone on the guy's face, and he's looking away, and the monster moves even though the monitor's paused. That's creepy. Like, that's scary. I like that level.
Leave
it
at that. Like, stop like making them. You're not waiting for them to appear and be this like, you know, Texas Chainsaw like axe murderer thing. No, that's not how it is. But that coupled with the mythology just really, really kind of grabs me. So
I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Marble Hornets Slender Man videos on YouTube.
Yeah.
Of course.
I never saw how that ended, but
I know. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna say, you know, it reminds me how like those were good to the extent that they were just an exploration of how creepy you can get just by like showing a weird thing in little glimpses and showing like some creature that you're not quite sure what it is, and it turns its head toward the camera. And like the more story they got, the less good those were.
Right.
And it's just like a perfect example of like, you really don't want to see it, because it's funny because their Slender Man doll was just this ridiculously stupid, like it was a pillow in a suit practically.
Right.
But like filming it the way they filmed it, where you almost never saw any bit of it, it was super effective. We'll link those videos.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. And that goes in, and that's kind of a good transition to our next movie, which is mine. I think the endings of horror movies are the things I like the least of them, because the mystery and the scary part is not seeing the thing, and horror movies always feel the need to kind of show their cards at the end.
Yeah.
And that,
I think, of a resolution or whatever.
I think loses the effectiveness, so I don't really like endings. But my movie, I loved the ending too. That's my excellent transition there. The movie I picked is a movie called The Babadook. It came out last year. I love this movie so much. I think some of the best horror movies use the monster or the whole conceit as a metaphor for something else, and I think The Babadook is one of the films that illustrates that point the most. So my quick explanation of the film: a woman is being driven to the hospital by her husband. She's in labor. They're in a car crash that kills him, decapitates him pretty gruesomely, actually. She survives, has her kid. And then the movie flashes to 7 years later. She is still in grief over losing her husband. She's never really allowed herself to process the grief. She doesn't really like her child, which of course means that his behavior is ridiculous. He's probably one of the most annoying kids ever. I don't know if you'll agree with me on that or not.
Yeah.
But I think that's his annoyance. I mean, it comes out of the basically mistreatment he's been getting from his mother his entire life.
I feel like they did a really good job with that, by the way.
Yeah.
It was like almost like bordering, like, wow, like this kid makes me want to punch the screen for like the first 30 minutes. And it's the evolution of the transformation of that to the way I felt about it at the end was just completely different.
Yeah, and I definitely think that this was obviously appreciated in a general way, but I think there were a lot of things that were aimed at making parents in particular uncomfortable because
sure,
there's
irritated.
Yeah, I mean, so much of the movie, not just the beginning, but so much of the entire movie is based around just like capturing these moments as a parent when you find yourself like annoyed by your child. And then you realize that this is like not a worthy emotion to be feeling, but you're feeling it anyway. And the whole movie is just sort of like shoving this in your face.
Yeah.
Because ultimately the whole monster is sort of I'll let Scott go on.
Yeah. So suddenly a weird pop-up kids book enters their lives talking about it's called Mr. Babadook, and it's this scary pop-up book about this monster that gets inside, and then it's really creepy, scares the hell out of them, and then weird stuff starts happening around the house, all related to this Mr. Babadook, and the kid is scared for his mother and thinks that the monster is going to try to take her over, and she doesn't buy it at first, but then starts becoming increasingly unhinged as the weird stuff happens. Spoils to the movie that the Babadook is a metaphor for her grief and her refusal to accept and deal with the death of her husband, and how that gets inside you, and if you ignore it, the more powerful it gets and eventually destroys you and your family. And it's one of those metaphors that just works so well.
Oh, it's fantastic.
It's such a good metaphor that there's an interpretation where it's not even a metaphor, where it's just literally there is no monster. She's just going crazy, and everything you're seeing in the movie is a hallucination or something.
Yeah. And the movie leaves that very well ambiguous because it's always her and the little kid that see this thing and nobody else. So I mean, the kid, you could easily say he's just a kid with a lot of imagination, and it could just be her delusions and exactly. And it's just there's this is like probably the third time I've seen the movie, and there's things that you pick up on, after you watch a movie. She never says "I love you" to the kid. The kid tells her "I love you" multiple times.
I did notice that.
And she never says it back. I think at one point she says "I love you" and she says "me too" or something. Yep. She never actually says the words, and that's really because, I mean, she kind of doesn't. I
think she says "I know" at one point.
Yeah,
I know.
I mean, she does on some level. She's a parent, she loves her kid, but she blames him.
Right. She clearly hasn't gotten over that.
Yeah, she looks at him as he looks like his father. She says that to him. He kind of acts like his father, and she can't get over it, so she can't do anything with this kid. I mean, she's doing a terrible job raising it, and at one point she just goes nuts and starts screaming, "Why can't you be normal?" Which, I mean, Matt, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm sure something that every parent at one point has thought when their kid's misbehaving.
or just like why can't you shut up or
Yeah.
whatever it is. I mean, it's actually kind of sad, because this kid really absolutely had nothing to do with that. The fact that he was
right. And the cool part about it is, over the course of the movie, the protagonist shifts, right? Like at the beginning of the movie, she's your main character. You see this kid as just an annoying little brat.
Yeah.
And as you learn more about the story and as the characters start to shift, you understand that the reason the kid acts like this is because his mother has never shown him love his entire life, and all he wants is like her to love him, really. And so that slowly shifts over the course of the movie until like she's kind of gone completely insane, or in context of the movie, she has this Babadook inside her that's making her do terrible things. I forgot that she literally strangled the dog to death.
Yeah.
Which is something that they, in the aftermath of everything, kind of just gloss over, that she literally strangled their dog to death.
Yeah. That Babadook book pretty much foreshadowed that whole ordeal.
I mean, it did.
My favorite thing, I think my wife pointed this out to me, that there's just this throwaway line when someone asks, like, well, what do you do? And she's like, oh, I used to make children's books.
Right.
And I never would have, like, it's just one line. It's not like an ominous, like, shot that zooms in on her or anything. It's just small talk.
Right.
It's like, oh, she made the book.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, and I love that at the end of the movie, just to nail the metaphor home, they don't get rid of the Babadook, right? Like,
no.
They lock it in the basement, but they feed it every day, which just goes to show you're really never going to get over a loss. You're never going to get over your grief. It's always going to be something that's with you. But you can't
ever
ignore
fill
it.
that hole,
Yeah, but you can't ignore it either. You can't just pretend like it's not there. Like she talked about at one point earlier in the movie, she's talking to her friend and saying that her friend accuses her of not actually being able to get over it, and she says, "No, I am over it. I don't even talk about him anymore." And it's like, that's not getting over a person. Not being able to talk about them is not really getting over them. Like that's just you not dealing with things. Yeah. So it's just
put it away and lock it up.
It probably has the happiest ending of a movie of its kind.
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah.
Yeah.
With the exception, unless you're the dog, in which case.
But it was good though. I mean, like I wasn't. I guess I wasn't expecting it though. Like I didn't. I kind of liked the way she confronted it, because it was like, you have in the middle of the movie where the Babadook, or basically the whole metaphor really ups the stakes, right? It's like I'll wager you that I can make you basically go over the edge even further than you already are. And it does. It pushes her to the point where she's basically this bipolar psychotic, kind of like on the verge of physically hurting her son. And
she is trying to strangle him, I believe.
She does. Yeah,
she's literally trying to kill him by the end of it.
It's like that one little touch, that little, emotional, grab for help that finally, like, is that like, it's like that's her, or maybe it's like her, like the whole notion of the Babadook basically being defeated, while it's like almost a kid's realizing, or she's realizing that she's stronger than that, and I think it's like that moment that she realizes it. But I love how she stands up, and it's almost like she's looking in a mirror. It's almost like if you're watching like a normal show, it's a person looking in the mirror and basically saying like, I'm going to beat this.
Right, because the way she beats it in the end is just by standing up to it, by facing it, and just dealing with it.
And the way they do it is just so good. It's like they make it all epic, and and it's one of those things where like someone that really doesn't understand the movie is probably thinking like, it's beating the monster, but no, I mean it's just like this major turn in her emotional state.
But I feel like, and the reason I think the movie's so good is because I think the metaphor is shown so clearly that I think even people just going to see a good monster movie, I think will get it. Mm-hmm. I think it lays it out so expertly that they'll understand. And it doesn't beat your head in with it. It's not like, but it sets it up so obviously that I think, and obviously is a bad word, because then if someone didn't see it, then they're going to feel insulted. But I'm just like, I'm just saying that it's told in a way that I think makes the metaphor pretty clear.
And that's one of the things I noticed between, kind of like, comparing that and Sinister, right? Almost like similar in some ways. But what I loved about Babadook is it's not flashy. It doesn't need a whole lot to really get the point across or to like be a scary movie. I think it did both like beautifully. It was creepy enough to make me. I may or may not have changed it at one point for a couple of seconds too.
Yeah, I guess that's something that we haven't talked about at all because we've been talking about the narrative. It's a very scary film.
Yeah,
it is very scary.
It uses techniques that I don't know if I've seen in any other movie. Like just scenes where like the mom is in bed and like the door to her room is closed and she rolls over and the door is now open.
Yep.
And like there's like maybe that doesn't sound scary, but like the movie puts you in her shoes so well that you feel like that just happened to you.
Oh yeah, no.
And how scary that would be.
And the part that got me when she's standing at her window washing dishes and looks across to see her neighbor. Mm-hmm. And then she looks down and looks up, and he's just like the Babadook's just like smiling. There in the background, just smiling. And it's not a jump scare; like nothing jumps out.
No,
he's just there, and he doesn't move. He's just there, and she freaks out, and that's
which is the way you got to do it. And like kind of what Matt was saying, like you putting yourself in that spot in her bed. One of the things that got me, I think, was when the noise that you'd hear. Is the door, right? It's something scraping against the door. But for a while, I kept thinking, because they I don't know, he positions this chair in her room like perfectly in front of the bed at this like little angle, and it's got this like kind of like little shadow, like hardly any light on it. And when I hear that noise, I seriously feel like it sounds like the chair is being dragged closer to her bed.
I think it might be actually, or is it not? I don't even know.
Well, see, I don't. That's the thing. I thought it was at the beginning, or like early on when it happens, or in the middle of the movie. But then later on, when the scratching happens again, it's the dog, and then it's the it's whatever. I think there's like it's something scraping the door. So maybe it was both. I don't know. Whatever it was, whether it was the chair or the door, it creeped the shit out of me. And I picked.
I think what they did is they do that thing that they do a lot in horror movies when. They're scraping at the door. She decides that the dog opens the door. The dog comes in. She lays back in bed, and then the same scraping happens at the door again, and the dog's already inside. And that's creepy. Like that stuff gets me. That's like, oh god.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not even like it. Even if like that. But it's just, I guess it's just like I kept thinking he was already in the room, and he's like pulling up a chair in front of her just to look at her and make her, just basically like playing with her, like the noises.
He is.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely is. Like that's the whole like, it's just slowly slowing with her, and the one last thing I want to talk about, and we'll move on. I think the set dressing is really good in this movie, like we were talking about. The makeup is really good. They were very low budget on this movie, so like I heard a lot of people complain about the Babadook once it's revealed itself looked really fake and silly and wasn't actually that scary. I disagree, but
I disagree too. Actually,
on their limited budget, the makeup work is good, but not even just on the monster. On the kid and her mom, it was really great too. The one scene that struck out to me was when he's going to the birthday party, and like she's standing. She's in a scene with all these other mothers, and the whole scene is like contrasting her terrible life as she sees it to their amazing life. Well, they're all well dressed.
Window.
They're all
like
well dressed
still with the light behind them, and
and she's sitting down, and they're all standing up, like overpowering her and imposing on her, and she looks like terrible. Her makeup is awful. Like she's not wearing anything. Her hair is frizzy, and these people are all nice and kempt, and that was just like a really really great filmmaking to drive a point home.
Oh yeah, and like the way they made her look throughout the whole movie, I thought was just fantastic. Like it was just you didn't even at the beginning, like you don't really feel like this poor lady can look any worse. Like
she's been barely hanging on, right?
Yeah, she has she's already not sleeping, and to make her continuously like by the end of it, I think she's literally just kind of staring, like she just has like a kind of a blank stare. Mm-hmm. just on the verge of just crazy.
Yeah, it was a really great performance by her and by the kid as well. I like
For sure.
when the child protective people come, and the question they ask him, he's like, "I'm tired because mommy has me on drugs."
Well, that's the thing too. It's very real. Like I thought a lot of the script I thought was done. I felt like I was like sitting in front of these people listening to stuff that they would actually say, and that's kind of a rare thing for horror. Like I feel like a lot of times it's pretty campy lines and stuff, but just this kid like spouting out lines and like pushing this girl and being like to me like, a lot of it felt real.
Really great film, really well done. And now, last but definitely not least, actually one of my all-time favorite movies of all time. Matt, talk about your selection.
So my film is The Thing, by John Carpenter, starring Kurt Russell and a handful of other great actors. So The Thing it's one of those movies where I think it didn't actually do that well when it was released.
I think you're right.
And I sort of see why, actually, because it's very slow paced and it's very unusual. It's not like other horror movies. But basically, it begins. There are these researchers at an Arctic research station, or on Antarctica, I guess, whatever you call that. And suddenly, they're characterized a little bit, and suddenly this sled dog from like an adjacent Arctic research station runs into their camp, and it's being chased by some foreigners who don't speak English, and there's sort of misunderstanding, and the foreigners are killed, and they put this dog in their kennel, and everything just builds very, very slowly, because for I don't know how many minutes it is, but I would say at least 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, like nothing weird has happened, actually. You just know that like these researchers came after the dog, and now the dog is in their camp. And honestly, I forget the order of events, unfortunately, but they end up going to the camp that the dog came from, and they find that everyone there is dead and everything is burned. And then they find basically that like these people got something out of the ice, and some kind of alien. It's implied. Mm-hmm. And then they go back to their camp, and pretty quickly, I guess, the dog like transforms into a hideous creature and like kills away the dogs.
Victim.
Okay, so it's funny, I'm having a really hard time summarizing this movie, and the reason is it's actually a very unusual movie in the sense that like you're never quite sure when you're watching the movie when things are happening, and it's intentional. Like
right.
Like for example, the dog just like walks into a room, and you don't even see who's in the room. You see the dog walk into a room, and then you just see the shadow of the dog and the shadow of a person, and then like the person turns to look, and then the scene ends.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to like get that the dog probably like assimilated that person into being a thing. So that's how it works, by the way, is that this creature basically assimilates you and replaces you with a copy, which is now one of them. Man, I've been rambling for a while. This movie really is. It's funny. I don't normally have this much trouble summarizing things, but
it's amazing.
What it is, yeah. It's all about the paranoia of not knowing who is one of these things.
Right, and that's what the movie does so well. Is it never like we're always in the same shoes as the viewer as any of the people in here. It never. There's never like a scene. Maybe once there's a scene in which we see the thing assimilate someone, so we know as a viewer who it is. That maybe happens once. Every other time, we find out who it is at the same time they find out who it is.
Yeah, and if you try to like guess who it is while you're watching it, you're like never right.
No, you'll always be wrong.
And yet when you watch it again, you see how it's plausible that person would be assimilated at this point in the movie.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, well, let's definitely see more than once type of.
And the brilliant part about that scene with the dog walking into the room that you're talking about is that's even before we see the dog transform into anything weird. Mm-hmm. So we just know, like the only thing we know about this dog is that a person tried to throw a grenade to kill it and accidentally dropped the grenade and ended up blowing themselves up. So they were like that. They were like so obsessed with trying to kill this dog that they were reckless and ended up blowing themselves up. Mm-hmm. So like, and by picking it's so smart they picked a dog too, because as humans we love dogs. We're automatically in defense of a dog that's being attacked. Like so we're already on the side of the dog. So the camera just kind of like, it never focuses on the dog while it's just kind of wandering around people, right? It doesn't like linger on the dog at all until that one scene where it moves into that room, and then we just see the guy turn, and then we don't see what happens. And it never specifically tells us what happens. Like, we never know who that guy is. We never know if he was taken over.
The main like perpetrator, that kind of starts everything, the chain of events. And it's funny that you all mentioned the dog, at the beginning. It's and that's kind of the feeling. They do a really good job of that. But, it kind of made me think, so the two guys that are chasing it were Norwegian, right? They're this Norwegian science station in Antarctica. And, you obviously know that there's something, weird going on because, the guy tries to blow it up with the grenade, right? Ends up blowing up himself and the whole, helicopter. And then the other guy, which kind of struck me. I was like, what if what if there's someone that knows like that language that was watching this? Like, did that guy just give away, the plot because he says something for like 10 seconds? He says something and then he starts shooting at the humans. Or he's shooting at the dog, but he ends up. I mean, he wants to kill it so bad that he hits one of the guys.
Yeah, and that's why they shoot him. And
right, and that's why the guy. The main, Gary, the main captain or whatever, ends up shooting him. But you definitely were like, I definitely love that the dog was kind of able to do that. Although you kind of, I was trying to think, because like that thing, it's an older movie, but it was a fantastic movie. But like, I was trying to think if I like hadn't heard about it, like what my reactions would have been, and that scene, where it fades out, the dog going into the room, I would have been like, something's weird about this, but I'm not. I don't think it's anything weird, I don't think it's anything yet, but because I kind of know, the general idea of what happens, I had a feeling that I knew what was going on. But yeah, definitely.
So let's talk about the practical effects, because incredible.
I think if you showed this to like a modern, person, and you didn't tell them that it was made when it was made, they would just assume that everything was CGI, because it looks so impossible.
But the fact that it's practical, we talk a lot about CGI versus practical and what's better. I think if you had done this CGI, it would have ruined a lot of it, because it's so slimy, it's so visceral. The scene, my favorite scene in the movie, when he's giving CPR to the guy, and his stomach busts open and turns into teeth and rips his hands off, which makes me jump every time I see it, even though I know it's coming.
Made me jump. Yeah,
it's so good, and you do that CGI, and I think it just takes so much of it away. In fact, I know it takes so much of it away because they made a prequel of the thing a few years ago that shows what happens in the Norwegian space, or the Norwegian center. It's a prequel thing, and they use CGI for the thing, and it just didn't work. The CGI wasn't bad by itself. They actually did a pretty commendable job at telling a story that no one really needed to ever tell. We didn't need to know what happened at that camp. The movie we saw told us everything we needed to know.
I read, like, okay, I haven't seen that movie and I have no intent to, but the great thing about this movie is that the thing is always morphing and changing forms into just the most grotesque, weird things. Like based on what it needs to be at that moment. So like at one point, like a person is like on fire, and then like the head is not on fire, so the head just like slimes and drops off onto the floor, and then
turns into a weird spider thing, right?
So it's like an upside down spider leg head.
Where my head is.
So like contrast this with apparently what they did in the prequel, where they just reused the same like monster model ideas from this movie in different contexts, and you're like, well, that's stupid, because this thing, whatever it is, it has like a library of body parts that it's choosing from based on what it needs at that moment.
Right, and that was the coolest thing.
You can't just copy it. That's like, it doesn't make sense.
We saw like they showed, they showed humans, they showed dog, but they also showed these cool like pieces of like space aliens that it's encountered over its thousands of years, like just things that clearly not of Earth, but like it was just so like it was so creative, and the mixture of, I mean, it's disgusting, but it's like disgusting in an amazing way.
Yeah, I have to share. This is not related to the movie per se, but I have to share. The author Peter Watts. I reviewed his book Blindsight. He's also written a short story called The Things, which is just the thing from the perspective of the thing.
Oh, Jesus.
And in the title, The Things refers to the humans because that's how it thinks of them. And it's really cool because now this is all obviously Peter Watts' imagination.
Right.
But like in his conception of how this thing operates, it can't conceive of organisms that are not all the same thing. So when it kills the first person, it figures that it's just doing some kind of like organic material transfer, because there can't possibly be any value to this one organism. I'm probably not doing this complete justice, but like it's great because the thing manages to be horrified at the nature of humans, just as we were horrified at the nature of the thing.
Wow,
that's cool.
That's fascinating. Actually, that's really cool.
I also wanted to talk about, well, I don't know if I want to talk about the end because I don't know if we're spoiling things.
I want to talk about the end because the end is so good. I don't know how you don't talk about the end.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's great. It's just like, okay, if you haven't seen this, then plug your ears for...
Or stop it. Stop the podcast and go watch the thing and then come back.
Stop the podcast, go watch it, come back to the podcast.
Yeah, that's right.
It's that good.
So Scott, you go ahead. You obviously have things you want to say.
So, the end is perfect because, like, you're left with two characters, and even our main character, who we've been with throughout the entire movie, there's still a remote possibility that he is the thing, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, so you're left. They basically blow up the entire station. They think they killed the thing, and there's two of them left, and the movie just ends with them sitting there drinking alcohol, staring at each other, waiting for one of them to make the other move, and that's how the film ends.
Yeah,
and it's just so perfect because the whole thing is the paranoia of not knowing, and to end on that moment. It wouldn't, if the film had him us win and successfully kill the thing and just end happy, or Kurt Russell,
blows it up with a bazooka or something,
and then like drives away in a vehicle or something. That would have ruined the film. Like, it's so thematically perfect.
Yeah, because just to reemphasize, like the thing's goal is actually to freeze. It wants everyone to die, and it wants to freeze, and then
because at this point
it knows more humans will come.
It's been made. Like I think that's the thing. It knows at this point that it's obviously being hunted. I mean, the way that the dog looks out the window when Kurt Russell, McCready gets back, with the general guy, and it's just looking at him like, oh shit, like he knows something, and oh look, they're actually pulling off like some mutated corpse, like that's just the dog, which I thought was fantastic.
Well, and there's some cool ambiguity to it because the thing, it's never fully explained, right? So we don't know. We assume it has the memories of the people it takes over, but we don't know. And we assume the cool thing that I thought, and I'm going to steal this because I heard this on another podcast, so this isn't my original thought, but there's some ambiguity in that end where not only do they not know if the other person is the thing, it's kind of implied, and again, this might be reading too much into it, that maybe they don't know 100% if they are or not.
Yeah. I think, I mean, that's sort of in the things where the thing just operates, the person sort of lets them do what they would do anyway, and then when it needs to change their behavior, it just sort of steps in and changes their behavior.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that like almost like a Take from Aliens kind of thing? When it's like in their body, it's like, oh no, that's more like a hatching process. That's kind of like, that's like time based,
Well, it is just the interesting horror of. I mean, it is sort of similar to Aliens in the sense of this like visceral body horror. With like weird morphing body things.
Yeah, because it's probably thinking like if it knows that I'm in it, then that person's gonna most likely sacrifice themselves and whatever quick death they can think of, But I mean, that's interesting that you pointed that out because I noticed that too. I'm like, I was sitting there watching. It's like they don't really know. They don't know that it's them, and they definitely don't know that it's them, but it's clearly them. Like
Yeah.
it really does take over kind of like their higher brain function,
Mm-hmm.
and makes them operate normally as if it's like, nope, it's not me. Shoot.
Yeah, and the fact
I've
that
been
we can
fine this
talk
whole
about
time.
it, yeah,
Yeah.
like this is just a movie that just sort of endlessly rewards like thinking about the details
Right.
of you know every single character and every single thing that the alien does. um and what's funny is like you first see it as a dog, but by the end it's gone most of the way to building a spaceship all by itself.
Yeah.
So like it's clearly super intelligent but
Yep.
has no interest whatsoever in talking to people.
Right.
Like it never takes over one of the people and then says like, "Hey, if you leave me alone, I'm going to go build a spaceship and try to leave." It's completely hostile and aggressive to all of them.
Right, and that's so good. Like I
like
just like there's so many ways to screw this movie up, in my opinion. That like there's so many missteps they could have made, and they didn't. Like
No,
John Carpenter, man,
it's
so
like
good.
a game of chess. Like that's the way I saw it as well. Like the thing is who's two steps ahead of who at this point, right? You have who's ahead? Is it McCready? I mean, McCready almost like falls behind, because he, as the thing plants whether it's him or whether he's part of it or whether it's the actual thing, it plants his shirt. In the fire pit or whatever was all torn up. I mean, like right there, it's like the things are, it's making all these subtle moves.
Well, yeah, and the truth is that
take each other out.
The truth is that they were never ahead. Like they were always going to lose, and they kind of telegraphed that just by showing what happened to the last station. Like they never stood a chance.
Of course.
Like, I mean, like,
of course, burning it down thing,
Yeah.
Right. I like to imagine that like the thing has been releasing spores into the atmosphere for the entire run of the movie. And they've already like blown to South America, and we're just watching what's happening in Antarctica while the rest of the world is being consumed. That's my imagination.
Yeah.
Well, and like he prints out the time lapse. I think it's like 27,000 hours, whatever that equals out to. That it would take over the world, which is not a lot. Not a lot of hours. But the one thing I did want to point out, or I guess it kind of reminded me of it when you were talking about kind of the practical effects and comparing it to the prequel, which I haven't seen yet. But that's unfortunate that it was bad. But
the thing, like, I don't mean to sound mean to them. I think they took a movie that shouldn't have been made and they did their best work with it. And it's not a terrible movie. It's not. It's like
a Kate
awful.
Beckinsale one.
Geez, I don't even remember.
I know some actress pretty well known.
Yeah. The main character is a female. Yeah, but
I don't even remember the trailer very well. So what I thought about was Dreamcatcher, and the Stephen King based movie or adapted movie, and one of the main reasons why, I mean, aside from the movie just being bad, or I don't know, I didn't really. Maybe I have to read the book or something. But one of the things that really disappointed me was just like the overuse of CGI. And it's the same type of creature, like mixing with human type of assimilation. It's very similar in that movie. And I never really felt tense, because I think that the most tense I felt is in the beginning when they're in the cabin. And these little like wiggly worms with teeth basically attack, poor Jason Lee. And other characters. Like that's the only time I actually felt afraid. But when the guy actually becomes the giant alien or whatever, and is just turning into this thing that eats, like at one point I think it eats the guy off the snowmobile. It's just so obviously computer generated that I just lost all interest in the movie. Like, and this was in the theater, and this was a while back, and it just goes to show that a movie with effects like this can really, it can really get the point across without having to worry about all this fancy stuff.
Yeah, well, I think I think the trick is when you're doing body horror like that, and there hasn't been a lot of body horror films lately, I don't think. But when you're doing it like that, I think it has to be practical. Like it has to feel visceral. Like, I mean, computers as they are now, they're doing really good, but there's still like a wetness and like a sloppiness to it that you just don't get in a computer.
It is. It's like someone superimposing like an animation, like straight into the just a very real picture. and you just can't really get past it, which is unfortunate. But
Yeah, in this movie, even when things have sort of a wrongness to them, it plays in the movie's favor because what you're looking at is supposed to be wrong and disturbing.
Right.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And like that's the thing too is like whatever happened, what happened to these real conversations that these teams have, like these research teams, these regular guys, it's like all these newer movies that come out when it comes to like, running away from a creature or whatever it is, these groups of people, like it's so unbelievably not believable, just
Hmm.
like it's
Well,
just like what are you talking about,
they all use shorthand, so they all make them archetypes, right? And
Hmm.
this film did have some level of that,
sure.
but they were all believable human.
They're believable
beings.
archetypes. Yeah, I mean the guy that was, whatever, like basically holding on to a joint, like a roach the whole time, and like that's the high guy, right? But really, they kind of still kept him pretty subtle, like in the background. Like every now and again, he spoke up, right, and blamed. The poor radio guy, Windows or whatever, started just yapping, saying, "Oh, well, why are you talking to me? Like, I think it's you." And like all of a sudden, they bring him in.
Yeah,
But
but see, I think the difference is a lesser movie takes the high guy archetype and then makes that the instrument of his destruction
Exactly.
or something
Mhm.
stupid. Where this
Absolutely.
movie just has, this is just a guy.
It's
that
just a
smokes
side.
pot.
Yeah.
Yep. Just a
These
guy.
are all just like relatively smart people actually
Yep.
who are like so much of the movie is actually just these people hashing through the details
Right.
of like, okay,
Right.
how are we going to survive this? How are we going to figure out who is a thing um, when we don't trust each other?
Just-
And I loved the part near the end. I think there's still like 4 of them left when it cut the power or something. So they're all just gonna freeze, and they're just like, "Okay, we're gonna die."
Yep.
But we got to make sure this thing dies too.
Right.
And it's just like no, like Kurt Russell gives that order, and like no, everyone's
shows
just like
the reactions.
everyone's just like, okay, yeah, there's no questioning of it. There's no silly infighting. Like it, like they're a team despite the fact that they can't trust each other.
Yeah. Well, in fact, I like as I recall the captain, the older guy, Gary or whatever, is like he looks at him with like these wide eyes. He looks at Kurt Russell's character and he's like, "Well, what are we gonna do?" This is the guy that's basically been leading them this whole time, or not the whole time, there, but at the, at that location, is basically looking at Kurt Russell, who's basically been the de facto leader at this point, just saying like, all right, we're gonna die. How do we take it down with us? Which has felt like a very real moment. It's this kind of like older, stubborn, like kind of anal type of guy who's just always kind of crazy. And of course ends up not being the thing. It's just his personality, like I don't know why they have to make it so complex these days with all the bullshit writing.
So we're going over, but I think there's some important stuff left to talk about. So I want to talk about something. Why do you think? What was the setting of Antarctica? Like why? I mean, besides just the fact that okay, that's isolated and therefore we can stop it from getting out at large. But you could have done that other places, I think. What do you think was specifically chosen about, okay, we're going to tell the story in this Antarctic research station?
Well, yeah, I guess you're forcing me to think about it. I probably would have just said, like, well, the fact that most
Has to
other
be
places
cold.
on Earth, the thing wins instantly. But there's definitely, like, a theme of isolation and alienation,
Yeah.
which is obvious in the fact that they're all suspicious of each other. And they're actually all kind of weird guys in the first place. Like, even before anything weird happens, it shows,
Yeah.
like, our protagonist is by himself drinking whiskey, playing chess against a computer.
And when he loses, he destroys the computer.
Yeah.
That's like,
Which is-
yeah, that's
which is
a
great.
perfect, it's a perfect, like, simple cinematic characterization, right?
Yeah.
It tells all you need to know about the character in one scene.
Yeah, exactly. So like the setting has literally driven them all to be a little bit kind of cabin fever, and then
Yeah.
on the metaphorical level, it's just this extremely hostile, alienating environment. So that would be my
Yeah.
essay answer.
I think you're right. I mean, I think that's, and I think there's that. I think that just the cinematic quality of being surrounded by ice and snow when you're in this one building, and the fire as well, I think, cemented that.
Mm-hmm.
So if I had to make one complaint about the movie, which I don't want to do because I love this movie, and this is a really stupid nitpicky complaint, and because I understand why they had to do it from a narrative reason, but as soon as you have done a test where you know exactly that everyone in the same room with you is safe, why would you ever separate from each other at that point?
Right.
You would always stay together.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not even. I mean, I think by the time they actually finish with the tests completely, they're just left to go to the older guy, which I find like one of the most interesting characters in the whole movie. The guy that they basically put in the shack by himself. They have to administer the test on him, and he ends up not being there. I don't know.
But they split up to do that. They're like, okay, you stay here with your gun, and we're going to go get Blair,
right.
and if he comes back without us, kill him.
Because Childs stays there.
Yeah, why would you split up? Everyone go together.
Yeah, stays there. And then they lose him, and they're like, well, what the hell? Where's he going?
And it's never really clear at what point Blair got taken over, right? Because at some point you see him sabotage the helicopter, and you think it's because he's doing this because he doesn't want the thing to get out, right?
But he could also be doing it.
But then also he could just be stealing parts to make his spaceship. So it's like,
right?
Yeah, my favorite. I think my favorite shot in the whole movie is when somebody goes to like check on him, and like he's been super irrational and
then all of a sudden he's super
violent and he's really docile and and he's sitting there sitting at the table, and behind him in the back of the frame there's a hangman's noose hanging from the ceiling, just sitting there.
It's actually a really good shot, and I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, that's a good point. And he's like, no, I'm okay now.
Yeah, I'd like to come in now.
Yeah.
In fact, that's the only time you see the Thing not acting like a perfectly normal person.
Right.
Yeah.
Which you could dig into if you wanted to, I guess.
I mean, or you could still even say at that point he still might have been human, and maybe he had just worked through his shit. Like it's so up in the air.
Which is right. Yeah, it is left up. It is left up in the air. But I guess if you had to lean towards one way, based off of not just that scene, but what he ends up doing with the parts, I guess maybe he did get taken over early, and he just played it pristine. Yeah. I mean, because look how far he did get with the actual little ship. I mean, it's literally almost like complete. But yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I love that shot. By the way, I thought that shot was fantastic.
Yeah, that was really well done.
Just looking through the little rectangular hole, and he's just sitting there like turning his head, and he's like, "But I don't want to stay in here anymore. Please let me out." And the noose is just right next to him.
John Carpenter knows what he's doing. It turns out.
I don't know why it took me 30 years to see this movie, but I'm so glad that you picked it. It's great.
Yeah, and I guess it's funny. I don't remember the name of it, but I don't think I realized this movie was what it was until I saw this particular YouTube review of it that drew my attention to a lot of these things, and then I kind of was like, wow, I really have to see this. So,
by the way, and there is one that I came across. I didn't watch it only because I hadn't seen the movie yet. But it's something about like 5 twists that you don't know about, and I think one of them is talks about McCready actually being the Thing, and I haven't seen it yet. Yeah, I haven't seen it yet, but I'll let y'all. I'll send it to y'all if that's it.
So that's, I mean, to tie this thing in a neat little bow. Those are all our picks, and like I said, I don't think these are necessarily our favorite scary movies of all time, horror movies of all time. Definitely my pick was not, although I do love it. I picked it because I think not many people saw it, and I want more people to see this movie, so I'm going to advertise it whenever possible. But I think they all show kind of a different kind of way to tell a horror story, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think The Thing is very
based on paranoia,
suspense and paranoia, whereas Gentry's pick was more, I mean, I don't want to call it a jump scare movie, but out of the three, it definitely had the most in it.
Sure, absolutely.
Then, whereas I think the Babadook is digging really into its metaphor with its scariness and a lot of
its
the horror.
imagery.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say, The Thing is about aliens basically. The Babadook is really about mental illness fundamentally. It's
Yeah.
and then Sinister is about fantasy horror, if you know what I mean. Like it's a fantasy creature, so they're different kinds of movies in that regard also.
Yeah, so considering we just sent an email out that said pick your movie and we didn't coordinate it at all, I think the types of movies we ended up picking were really good. There's going to be a whole lot of other horror movies I'm sure we're all going to be watching now that we're getting closer to Halloween. Gentry, I know you in particular will probably be watching Halloween 1 through
For sure.
70.
I only like the first two in H2O, but yeah.
Well, I mean, Gentry and I are going to a summer camp this weekend where we're going to be watching a ton of Halloween movies. We're going to be watching Friday the 13th at a summer camp.
That's a
Camp
terrible
Hollow
idea.
Yep.
It's going to be a lot of fun, but
As long as another hurricane doesn't hit.
oh god, I hope it did. Did you see it? Yeah, I'm worried about the rain.
Did you get the email?
Yeah, I did. But we will, I'm sure, talk about that when we're back next week. Which next week will be part 1 of our book club series, talking about Wool. We'll be talking about the first 3 sections, which we'd like you guys to wrap up by Friday and send me all your questions. I got some messages from people that said they were reading it and they really like it, so that's good news. I also really like it. I don't know if either of y'all are in it yet or not.
I have not.
You better get started. It's actually a really quick read. It's very good so far too. So that's Daily Planet Book Club. I think that's all we got. Gentry, where can people find you on the interwebs?
Still at the old @wench tweet. WENCH.
I will laugh every time I hear that.
TWEET. Otherwise, yeah. I mean, I guess find me. Well, yeah, not really on Facebook. I pretty much just threw the Daily Planet stuff on Facebook. So.
Yep. And Matt, how about you?
I am on Twitter at MORIDINAMAEL, which will be in the show notes, and I am a contributor to dailyplanetfilms.com. How about you, Scott?
I am at ScottDaly85. That's DALY. Our website Twitter is at dailyplanetfilms, and we are all at www.dailyplanetfilms.com. Try to update at least 5 times a week. Try to do daily, but there are only a few of us, and we all have jobs, so that's kind of tough. But check us out. And thanks, you guys, for coming and joining me. Gentry, thanks for being our guest again. We appreciate it. Always fun talking to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys, and happy Halloween, everyone. Hope everyone has a good weekend.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
All right, see you guys next week.